Escape to the metaverse. Better act like you know. Yeah. You are now tuned into the Matthew and Rizzo show. Yeah. Escape to the metaverse. Better act like you know. Yeah. You are now tuned into the Matthew and Rizzo show. Yeah. Escape to the metaverse. Better act like you know. Yeah. You are now tuned into the Matthew and Rizzo show. Yeah. Escape to the metaverse. Better act like you know. Yeah. You are now tuned into the Matthew and Rizzo show. Yeah.
Hey everyone, before we begin this week's episode of the Matthew and Rizzle Show, just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Proof of Beauty. Proof of Beauty is an experimental digital experience studio. The blockchain is their canvas and the tokens are their brush. You can learn more about Proof of Beauty by checking out pob.studio. You can follow them on Twitter as well at PRRF Beauty. That's PRRF Beauty on Twitter and pob.studio on their homepage to learn more about their projects like Hash, London, and Publico. Thank you and enjoy the show.
Okay, Yelly, welcome to the Matthew and Rizzle Show.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me, and shout out to Abysms for requesting this podcast interview.
Yeah. Hey, Abysms. Cool. Well, I'm really excited to chat with you today about your art, the NFT space at large, art in the NFT space and the traditional world, all that good stuff. But first, before we begin, I'm curious if you could kind of share a potted history about yourself, where you've come from and what drew you to the space and what you're doing today.
All right. So a brief history about myself. I came into the space in 2019. At the time, I was a restaurant server. And I started off on an app called Additional App, which was kind of like an Instagram UI sort of NFT app that let users mint for free. And that's how I just started putting out my photography, some digital mashups, some artworks, and started connecting with everyone in the community. Little by little, I realized, hey, this is going to be a little bit bigger than what I anticipated, started applying to different platforms, got more involved in the community. And long story short, I left the restaurant business to just do NFTs full time. And I've been doing that ever since. I'm also a Playform Art Studio resident. So I've been working with some AI software, training it on my generative analog instant photographs. And I will be dropping a collection on that soon that will come with an AR powered instant photograph. So be on the lookout for that.
So for your generative art practice, did that start after you came into this space, or were you doing generative art before, like when you were working in the restaurant business?
It started within Additional in a really funny way. That when I first started on Additional, I was just putting out photography and just stuff for my Instagram feed because I didn't know any better. And then I saw what everybody else was putting out, some, crazy glitches, some really cool generative art. And I was like, all right, let me explore this front a little bit and, push my artistic boundaries. So I started playing around with some applications. And there was one in particular, I can't remember what it was called, but it produced similar light patterns to what I'm doing with my photography now. And I was obsessed. I, dropped a mini series on Additional called Meshed. And, completely forgot about it. Then during the pandemic, I was, just playing around with my camera and some lights that I have in my room. And I started, I made that pattern again. I said, wait a minute, I can do this manually now. I don't need the software to generate, these cute little lights and colors for me. I can just do it myself. I can do the settings. And I just started experimenting. And I think a month or so afterwards, I got a message from my first collector, Jake Brugham, who was actually on Additional as well. He collected my very first Additional sale piece. And he reached out to me and he was like, yo, I love what you're doing with these lights. You need to pursue it. Like, just follow whatever this intuition is. And I followed his advice and I just kept playing with my lights, pushing it a little bit further. And then I thought, well, let me push the generative part a little bit more and introduce the AI software aspect to it. Go on.
No, I was just gonna say, it's so cool to hear like the story of the come up on Additional, which I feel like doesn't get a lot of credit that it should, for being like one of the really early playgrounds for experimentation within the space. Just creating art and being able to do exactly what you said, like mint for free. I feel like when Rarible popped up, minting was super cheap, and it was like a similar phase of that. Was also saying to Matt before, I feel like we've swam in the same pond for like ever together, but never actually like done a thing together or like really crossed paths until now. So again, shout out to Abysms for sort of hooking this up. Would love to hear, as someone who started out like very early on with NFTs and experimenting before like anyone was really paying any attention, and seeing the progression now, like taking a look through your work, I feel like I really love how you have sort of like stayed in your lane, like doing what you obviously really like to do, but like building upon that. Would love to hear your take on like the space overall, like how the big NFT boom, like how has affected or not affected your approach, and just sort of the lay of the land from someone who's been here from, very early times.
All I can say is that everything has changed. Everything has changed from 2019. It's an entirely different world that we're interacting in right now. Back then, Additional was really an app way ahead of its time. It really was. It gave users a lot of features that we're asking for today. In-app trading, you could trade NFTs. I want this one from your collection, I'll give you this one from mine, and then just instantly swap them with people. It was a phenomenal time, and I'll forever be grateful for it. But yeah, the comeuppance since then, I've seen a lot of shifts in the space. Back then, we were literally just giving away our art for free. X copies were selling for $5. They were sitting there, untouched for over a year. Yeah. It was crazy, and I still hold on to that sort of mentality of, not my hands. Sorry, that sounds terrible. I want my art in the hands of the people. And back then it was so easy, you would just claim it, hand it out and it's yours. And I would give it away on Twitter and be like, oh, you didn't claim this edition? I've got mine, you can have it. And to this day, I'll have some collectors or some fans reach out and be like, hey, I really like this piece, but, it's out of my budget, or, can I trade you for something, or, work something out? And I'll be like, of course, if you want my art, I will do whatever it takes to make sure that you can have it and enjoy it. But moving on from that, the NFT boom, the PFP boom shifted a lot of perceptions in the space. And it ignited it, but pushed artists to the side for a brief moment. But I think it was necessary. Without the influx of people coming in with the excitement of, profile pictures, what's happening here? Oh, NFTs, like we wouldn't have this big rush that we have right now. So I'm thankful for it. Even though there was a lot of drama in the leading months of whatever's happening right now with Bored Apes, CryptoPunks, all the other PFPs. It wasn't an easy road with those as well. You always have the naysayers and the haters. I'm like, oh no, don't invest in those, invest in artists. And my mentality back then was, yeah, you're right, invest in artists. This is kind of dumb. But then I took a step back and I saw the bigger picture of what was really happening in the landscape. And I thought, well, this can't just be a space for artists. If we want to build the metaverse, it has to be for everybody. So let's invite, everybody. Let's welcome them in. And, I'll admit I dipped my toes in the PFP world, and it was fun. I love it. So I'm here for all of it. The good, the bad, the ugly, the fun, the terrible, the dramatic. Like, I'm here for the long haul.
Hey, right on.
I love that attitude. That's so refreshing. And that's the exact same mindset that I think I have, and you have to like really enjoy all of this, because like the whole world can be here is that potential, right? And there's already like a really interesting kind of diversity of like weird projects doing all the things. It's still super early and super small, don't get me wrong. But keeping that open mind and like seeing these weird, wacky things that happen, being able to kind of like just be entertained by the drama and not take it so super seriously and work yourself into like a frenzy of like, oh no, how dare these PFP projects kind of like extract or extort all the value and meaning and importance of the space, and just taking it for what it is, like this interesting technology that artists can use as much as like the biggest grifters or like the most redundant reductive projects or whatever. Anyway, I just love your attitude and your approach. And I wanted to shout out before when you're talking about additional, and Jake Bruckman from CoinFund, big shout out to him. They just did so much to help spur on this early base of artists that were coming into the space and learning about NFTs and the whole tokenizing and minting process. I remember back on Cent Days, there was this really interesting early crossover from people coming from additional to Cent, kind of sharing more longer form about what was going on. And it was really instructive for me as just a collector. But speaking of collecting and your collector base, I'm just curious, I always like to ask, how do you think about collector experience? Like you mentioned Jake as your first collector, and I know you have more collectors since then. How do you think about them? Are they just individuals to kind of like soundboard off of? Are they abstract individuals for the most part who are just kind of supporting you? What's your perspective on them? And then how do you interact with them? And how do you think about releasing future work to an existing collector base?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I've been blessed with the collectors that I've had. I appreciate each and every one of them because they do sustain my livelihood. So thank you to all of them, especially Jake Bruckman, though, because I mean, I say this to him all the time. He was my very first collector. And it sounds a little bit silly to say it so often that way, but like it really does mean so much to me, because back then, like I said, I was a server in a restaurant. That's just what I did. And in my mind, I was like, I shouldn't be doing this. It's not what I'm meant for, but I couldn't quite articulate it. And when I started posting work on additional and getting feedback, I was like, okay, this is nice. And then when Jake reached out and he was like, hey, I really like this piece you did. Can I buy it from you? And back then, like on additional, there wasn't a sale option. You couldn't bid or anything. So it was just trading for free. I didn't even have any Ethereum at that point. And I thought, wow, here's someone who likes what I do so much that he wants to pay for it. And it was only $17. Like it was 0.1 ETH, $17. But like, it was life-changing. It really was. And from that moment on, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to shift my attitude and, what I'm putting out. And that was that moment that sparked in me. I was like, okay, well, now I'm an artist. I have collectors. I'm going to, put out a body of work that, I can be proud of and they can be proud of as well. But how I interact with my collectors is something that I take very, very personally. Keeping Jake Bruckham as an example, we had a NFT NYC last year in November. And I wasn't sure if he was going or not. And he, sent me a DM and he was like, hey, there's this Dreamverse event going on, do you know anything about it? And I said, oh yeah, I've got tickets. If you're heading out, to that event, let me know. That'd be awesome. Didn't hear back from him. And I was like, okay, is he going? Is he not going? I'm not sure. But I had dropped a mini collection of some instant photographs that I had done, to just hand out to some of my longtime collectors. And most of them were additional folks. So again, shout out to them. But I didn't know if Jake was going to be there, but I had taken a small little note and, his copy, his instant photograph that I had minted. So I kept the physical and I had it in my little bag. And towards the end of the night, I was almost about to head out. And I came across the CEO of Playform, Jennifer Chang. And I was having a conversation with her. And as I'm talking to her, I see Jake and I'm like, oh my goodness, is this Jake Bruck? I'm like, tell me this is him. Please, Lord, tell me this is Jake Bruck so I can finally meet him in person. I was freaking out on the inside. And he walks up and I was like, oh my God, Jake, it's me. It's Jelly. Like, it's YRDGZ. Like, oh my God, I've been waiting for this moment. I have something for you. I have something for you. And he just looked at me like I was crazy. He was like, what do you mean you have something for me? Like, what? And I pull out this little envelope and I'm like, this is for you. I just want to thank you so much for everything. And, you know, like, thank you for being my first collector. And like, I'll always hold on to that moment. It was precious.
Yo, what a great story. You got your whole entrance into the space is like such a great story, honestly. Yo, I would love, I don't know that Matt and we must have talked to people who like dabble in like the style of art that you do, but I feel like I've never really like heard from people about the process. And, you know, you've mentioned the lights a couple of times, like you're training AI to do like some generative work. For listeners who may not be like already familiar with like your technique and like sort of your style and you know, your approach, can you sort of describe like what that is like and also like what the strategy is with like training an AI in that style?
Okay, so for my when I say my lights, I have a strip of LED lights that I control with some a little remote control. I change the light settings, the tempo of it, the speed of them, and I just do some long exposure photographs. That's the simplest way to put it. But there's, you know, some motion technique, there's some, you know, some lighting techniques, some speed techniques that I do. And it's basically just really pretty strips of lights and colors. That's what I do. And I do those, you know, I do them digitally on my iPhone. I do them on instant cameras like the Fuji Instax. I do it on 35 millimeter film, on standard cameras. So I'm experimenting with this technique on a lot of different lens-based cameras. Also, just to note, I'm also going to experiment with a 3D 120 stereo camera. And I have to shout out Coldy for the idea, because I had met him at NFT NYC, and he was like, you should try using a camera with 2 lenses and make your lights 3D. But I haven't fully experimented just quite yet, but that's something that's in store for the future for my listeners to get excited about. But yeah, so that's my lights, just pretty lights in little rainbow patterns all scattered about, analog generative. And in terms of training the AI on that, I had an entire collection of those analog generative photographs shot on Instax film, series of 100, called Instabstracts on OpenSea. I took the series of 100 and I ran that through the Playform software, and I trained it for a couple dozen hours. And it created its own version of the generative lights with its own instant photo type border. So they look kind of like glitchy Polaroids. And when that project is released, you know, users will be able to mint their own, you know, AI lights. And that will be that. And that will be called Ganalog. So generative analog for short.
That's so cool. I always love taking a peek into the process of the artists, the tools that they're using and everything. There's parts of your work that, especially like the lighting and the photography combination, really does remind me of like Giselle Flores.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's the highest of compliments to receive. Thank you, thank you, thank you. She's my favorite.
She's absolutely amazing. Also, I do need to double click into that Cody impression that you did. Like you almost sounded exactly like Cody, like the affect that he has. He's like, no, you should. It's like perfect Cody. One thing I was noticing going through your body of work, and really interested to hear the background into it, is that you're on multiple platforms, and it seems like you're running different experiments, different platforms. Tell me how you think about all the different platforms that are available to artists today, and like, how do you choose and how do you think about releasing on these different platforms like Known Origin, Object, Ephemera, Rarible, OpenSea, etc.?
It's overwhelming. It really is overwhelming with the options that we have. But then again, I don't think we have enough. which is ridiculous to say, but it's true because I mean, it's fun to have all these marketplaces and, you have the big players you see, super rare and known origin and rareable. And you're like, okay, they're trustworthy marketplaces, but sometimes you just want something a little bit more freeing and less centralized, but that will come with time, I suppose. But when it comes to deciding where to mint, it's honestly something I hadn't thought of until I guess like the start of this year. Because I would just, sort of look at my body of work and think, okay, well, how does this fit into what I have on known origin already? Or, if it doesn't fit on known origin, well, I'll just throw it on Rarible. But if it's a photograph, then I'll put it on ephemera. But, I'm not really minting much there. So what do I do? And then I moved to OpenSea. But now it's like, no, don't mint on OpenSea because that lazy minting contract is terrible. You should get your own contract. So I'm looking at getting my own contract, but I already have my own contracts, that I started a few years ago, but I don't mint on them anymore. And it's like, oh my God, what do I do? So I really don't know. It's too overwhelming. But I think moving forward, the plan is just, get a manifold contract for, I guess, each type of work that I'm going to do and then just categorize them that way. And hopefully get into super rare someday. I don't know.
When you were mentioning like, sometimes you want a platform that's like, less centralized, obviously big fan of additional from back in the day. Like what that's out there today, do you feel like captures that sort of like same spirit the most, or is there anything out there? And like, I feel like there's a lot of talk about like Instagram sort of going that route of additional in terms of like functionality and everything. And would be interested to hear your thoughts on, whether or not that would be like good for the space, or how that would affect the space and, what you do and everything. Just what you need is like, another option out there, I'm sure. But it would just be interested to hear your take. Also, like how more options would be beneficial as well, because you're saying there's so many, but like possibly the need for more. Like what would be good?
That's a very good question. I mean, I think if something came out that was similar to additional, I don't know if it would work in today's landscape, just because additional was so organic, but it was also free. And that allowed a lot of, I mean, I guess part of the downfall of additional, a lot of people don't know this, but it was a copy minting issue that caused a bit of a scandal. And, a lot of people were like, oh, you're minting work that isn't yours, or, you're minting plagiarized works. And, some artists took offense to that in the space. And they're like, well, everything that's minted on additional is fake. Then, nothing there is original. And then it kind of cast a bad light on additional in a sense. But if something came out like that today, I don't think it would work. I wish it would if it was done well, but I don't think it would work the same way because it would just be crowded with so many people. It would just be an endless feed. Back then it was maybe less than 40 people at most, and on a daily basis, it was maybe like 20, 25, active users that, I personally connected with, on a regular basis. So to imagine an app like that being flooded by thousands, hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of people just minting whatever photograph on their Instagram feed, like it's not even going to be, art or anything good. It's just going to be whatever they want to post. Then I think that's bad. But if it were regulated in a sense where it's like, okay, you have to know what you're doing. Like you have to know that this is an NFT that you're making and it will be on the blockchain. Like, when I first started on additional, I didn't know, they created a wallet for us. You get the little warning signs. It does say, this is what you're doing, but I didn't know any better. So, I did start posting, some landscape photographs from Instagram until I realized, oh no, this is meant for art. But I was posting art, but, my shift in perspective, made me realize this is not the type of Instagram app that most people are used to. So I think the content would get a little bit messy. As far as marketplaces that we should be having today, I think something like Tezos, something like, what was it, Hick on Tezos? Something similar to that, but on Ethereum. I guess the closest that we ever got to that was the early Rarible days, but not a lot of people know about that because back then it was the start of the trash art era and everything on Rarible was trash. And back then that wasn't a good thing, in collectors' eyes. So they stayed away from it. But early Rarible days was the second best thing next to additional because it was just freeing. You could post whatever you wanted. You saw brilliant art from artists like Robness, Max Osiris, Lulu, Jay DeLay, Second Realm, iHodl, Cypherpunk, just so many talented artists that were just like, I'm not going to put this on Super Rare. I'm not going to put this on Known Origin. Like, fuck it, balls to the wall. I'm going to put this on Rarible. And that was magical. So something in that like organic nature of it, just, you can't replicate it. It's just, it happens and it happens. And if you're there, congrats, you were there for the miracle. And if you missed it, well, too damn bad.
Yeah, I sort of, that transition from like early additional days to early super rare days to early Rarible days to Hickett Nuke early days before it became unusable. That magic that you're talking about, it's really interesting because there's a lot of the characters in each of those platforms, either the same artist or the same spirit that each of those early platforms kind of embodied, which created that magic, kind of has shifted in a really interesting way. That
it definitely has. I'm sorry.
That is actually, it feels similar to me. Like if you look back in history and just like taking one example, like early 60s, San Francisco Haight-Ashbury, right? Where like the hippie explosion was happening. You had like the Grateful Dead going there on the street, like super early, like when it was just starting before, like even the masses were arriving, like even like as they were on the road to San Francisco, to Haight-Ashbury, that specific neighborhood. That was like the epicenter of cool. And everyone was just having a good time and vibing until they weren't. And like gentrification happened, people got kicked out in a way that's like similar to like super rare. Everyone's having a good time buying really low priced, amazing art. And then money started to come in. Then like terms of service started to be more strictly enforced, and Robness and Max Osiris and Second Realm got like kicked off, right? Forcing them out. But unlike the San Francisco example, where like once that initial magic of Haight-Ashbury was done, people were like geographically and physically displaced. Like they had to go different places. They couldn't band together. But like, because we're on the internet, we can, in a critical mass, go to a different platform and sort of like recreate that spirit, as long as it's like organic and people vibe with it. That to me makes me so optimistic for the future, right? Like we don't know what platform the magic will land at next, but I'm optimistic that as long as there's artists out there that love to create and there's collectors out there that love to collect, we'll find it again. And I think it's just important to try to figure out and learn from the mistakes and why we haven't been able to maintain it for like an extended period of time on the previous platforms. I've always been thinking about that. The way that you're talking about it just really reminded me of it.
Absolutely agree. I mean, at the end of the day, it really isn't about the platforms that we're minting our art on. It really is just about the artists. Mm-hmm. You know, our art, wherever we mint it, it's going to be on the blockchain and, you know, on our Twitter feeds when we post it, you know, for people to see. So as long as we have that art, we can take it wherever with us, you know, so whatever platform may come next, you know, let it come. Let's enjoy that organic, you know, early days underground vibe of it, you know, make the best of it and, you know, move on to the next. But, you know, we'll always have the art.
Yeah. I feel like gas crushed a lot of it, or it seemed like it, once like things were sort of like, I don't know, and maybe I'm wrong. You actually have a better, like much better ground floor perspective than I do, but it felt like to me as someone who's, mostly a collector, that once gas price sort of rose, like Rarible didn't really adjust their policies that prevented people from like experimenting and everything. It just like priced a lot of people out. And then there wasn't really an alternative. I don't know, wax came around. I'd be interested to hear like what you think of some of the other like, Tezos like alternatives, like low cost minting that are also out there. But I feel like until any of those platforms got like even like remotely robust, people were just priced out of doing stuff like that. And it's a shame because, the infrastructure on Ethereum is just so superior to everything else that's out there, even the ones where it's like essentially free to mint. So there's just like this weird like breakup of the, where the tech is at and where the price efficiency is at. Is that sort of your take on it, or how did it seem to you around that time?
I've seen it all. I've minted for free and I've minted for, upwards of $200. So I've seen it all. And it prices artists out, and it's a shame. It really is. So when, lower cost networks like Tezos came around, I was like, oh, hell yeah, this is awesome, because it's just so cheap to do. And it's frustrating to see because I want more artists on Ethereum, because like you said, the infrastructure is so much better. And I learned from a dear friend Mighty Moose that token standard means everything, and these 1155s are just not as good as the 721s, so there's got to be some solution to this scaling and to the gas fee problem. But I'm sure, with time something will be solved. There'll be some solution to this problem. But until then, we just have to either suck up the fees or, move to the lower cost networks. I did try out EOS, I think back in 2020, which was relatively cheap. And I did have, a bit of fun on it, but I don't think it took off much. And Tezos is phenomenal. Just everyone's there now. But like you said, everything's got to be on Ethereum. That's where the big moves are happening. But I do see big things coming for Tezos as well. So, it's good to have your eggs in multiple baskets. Let's hope that someone out there is creating some solutions for these problems as we speak.
Okay. So also I have to say big shout out to Mighty Moose, whom you just mentioned.
Yes.
And I know he has very strong opinions on, first of all, like centralization versus decentralization. At first, I think he was more binary in like Web 2 versus Web 3, but like after calling out like Nifty Gateway, I think we walked him back to looking at like the Web 2.5 kind of like middle ground. But I know he has strong opinions on token standards too, and I like that sort of fire, that spice, to kind of like talk about honestly, like shortcomings, strengths, weaknesses, pros, cons about things. I don't know if you have like spicy takes or anything like that directly, but what are some opinions that you hold that may be controversial, or at least like not mainstream in the NFT space when it comes to like technical standards or approaches to whatever? I'm curious about that.
If I had a spicy take, it would be on PFPs, but only because, I'm a trash artist, first and foremost. So all that, Max Osiris and Robness and, Second Realm have done in the space, to push forward trash art and what that means. I love it. I respect it. I admire it. I'm here for it. But back when the Bored Apes first came out, I'm sure you've seen the conversations on Twitter. It's like, oh, don't jump into the Bored Apes. All the hot takes on why PFPs are bad, and Robness burning his ape and then burning a punk. And back then, I didn't know what, like, I respected it and I loved the passion for it and like I admired it. But like in my mind, I was like, this is fucking crazy. Like he's out here just burning these aspects that are, it was insane to me. Like I love the performative aspect of it. Like I'm so here for it. But at that time, you know, everyone's like, I'm not buying apes because, you know, I'm not here for it. I don't agree with what they stand for. I don't like the community, you know, like just that sort of attitude towards the apes. And that was during a time where I was like, well, I don't really know what's going on. Like, this is my first, you know, experience with it. You know, I missed out on the punks. I saw, you know, Pranksy do his, you know, giveaway on Rareable, and I missed that boat. I'm not going to miss it again. But all of my trash artist friends are like, nah, stay away from the apes. You know, they're terrible. And in the background, I was like, well, I'm just going to get myself one and join the community and, you know, see what it's like. And, you know, I got an ape and I saw what it was like. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. You know, I see what they're doing here. I love it. It's fantastic. And then after I got my first one is when Robness burned his. And I was like, oh, my God, it'd be cool to stand up as a trash artist and be like, well, I'm going to burn my ape, too. But like, no, I paid good money for this. Like, this is like, like to me, like I've only ever collected to collect. Never to flip, never, you know, just to buy it out and, you know, hold it and, you know, this is my investment. You know, I never collect for that purpose ever. So when I bought my ape, I bought it because I liked it. I was like, everyone's saying don't buy the apes. They're ugly. They're this, they're that. And I was like, well, I kind of like them. So I got one. And then I immersed myself in the community and I was like, nah, this could be the next CryptoPunks, but I'm not really sure, but I can't say that on Twitter because all my friends are going to be like, no, not the apes, not this. So for months, I just, you know, kept to myself. You know, I put up my little profile picture every once in a while, but didn't want to make a big deal out of it just because like the trash artist in me was like, I'm like, I feel a little hypocritical, but not really like, so that's my spicy take is PFPs aren't all that bad because I love mine and I'm glad I held on to it and I will hold on to it because like I said, I only bought it because I liked it and I wanted to collect it and that was it. But full disclosure, I've only ever bought one NFT with the intention of flipping and that would be my second ape. And that is that. Once I was like, well, if I'm gonna, you know, if this does moon or, you know, whatever, then I can't sell it because I bought it to keep it. So I have to, you know, get a second one to sell. But that's my spicy take is I love the PFPs.
Yeah, that's the strategy. Get two because, you know, you can never sell the other one if you like it too much and everything. You know, that's the most hilarious take. And your honesty is like so funny and refreshing to hear as well. I actually lost my train of thought with the apes and the profile pictures and everything. God damn it, Matt, help me out, man. I was just laughing at like her whole story and everything. And I'm like, dude, I found myself in like so many similar scenarios where I'm like, oh, I like this thing, but I like it goes against everything like I'm supposed to like, you know, support and everything. But I'm like, fuck it, they, you know, I just sort of like it.
I think yelling.
I actually saw a tweet from someone I follow and I was like, oh man, I wish I didn't, you know, listen to everyone on my Twitter feed saying don't get an ape when I wanted one, but like I didn't and now like I don't have it. I was like, you know, you can respect and admire all of like your influencer and artist friends as much as you like, but at the end of the day, you always have to, you know, do your own research and make decisions for yourself. And if there's any takeaway from this interview for anyone listening, it's just that collect what you like. Don't collect what everyone else is collecting just because, you know, it might make you money or they like it or like if you don't like it, don't buy it. That's it.
You know, we had a laugh recently about this, about getting stuck with some stuff that you don't like and then you got to scroll through it. It's like, oh my God. You know, real quick, can you put a thing to rest here? What does YRDGZ stand for? And why so many consonants in a row? And am I supposed to pronounce this in some way or like, what is going on here? Please help.
Okay. So YRDGZ is literally just an acronym of a whole bunch of letters in my name. So the RDGZ is just my last name without any vowels or some extra consonants. And the Y is just the first letter of my name. But when I first started on Additional, I didn't like, it's like, oh, pick a username. And I always just use my acronym for everything just because it's short and I hate using like my full name or whatever. So I just use that and it's stuck. And that's what I've got. I'm stuck with YRDGZ.
It's super recognizable. How do you pronounce this in your head? Is it YRDGZ or is it like yard?
In my head, I say every letter. I'm like, oh,
okay.
I shouldn't have done this to myself. But like I did. And I've considered a rebrand too, but I'm like, people are going to, not recognize me anymore.
Okay, cool. As long as I know like what it is, how to say it. YRDGZ. Got it. Cool.
YRDGZ, yeah. I think my boyfriend just kind of like YRDGZ and just like pronounced it in his head. I'm like, that'll do. I'll take it. I'll respond.
Love it. No, I want to plus one to the golden rule that you're talking about, like collect what you love. That's it. And that, I think, captures that magic of the old Additional days and captures the magic of all the other moments and special that happen at these platforms, right? I think it applies to creating too. Like, you got to create what you love.
I'm sorry, not to interrupt, but now that you mention Additional, I think that's where I got that mentality from, of collect what you love. Because on the app, you would literally be flooded with just an Instagram feed of everyone's art, and you could claim whatever pieces you liked. And if you didn't like it, you didn't have to claim it. So like, I would only claim what I liked. So like, I mean, that's where that translated from. Sorry, it just clicked when you said Additional. I was like, I only
that's interesting.
Like, I claimed what I liked, so I still do that.
Oh, 100%. And like that's the most dramatic example, because it was literally only collecting, right? The buys happened in the DMs.
Yep.
Hilarious.
Until we had a trade feature towards the end where like, if you had an NFT that I wanted, I can be like, hey, I'll give you this one if you give me that one. And then you could counter and be like, no, I want this one instead. And then we would just instantly swap NFTs. But like I said, an app way ahead of its time.
Yeah.
100%. No, it's beautiful. It can't be overstated. And like, you see that sentiment come up here and there. But it's like when you fully, truly like collect and create like that, that's when like a lot of the frustration that pops up here and there, especially when like the market gets a little colder, gets a little chilly out there, sales start to dry up a little bit more, big sales happen more and more infrequently, people get frustrated. But if you're just collecting and creating what you love, like none of that actually matters.
None of it stresses you.
Yeah. Can't say that enough, honestly. So what my last question that I had before we do the typical Matt and Riz shakedown, where we we violate your wallet and you're like, what are you collecting? Before that, I wanted to ask a little bit about Playform and that residency that you're part of. Like, what does being a resident artist actually mean? And like, what is Playform doing?
Well, in my experience, being a resident artist I have to give a huge, huge shout out to Jennifer Cheng, the CEO of Playform, and the entire Playform Art Studio, because they have given me not only the tools to create something a little bit more out there and out of the box, and kind of give me the tools to experiment and tinker and see what I can create with them, but they've given me the freedom and the time to do so. So it was a year-long residency program, and don't tell them, but I think I'm past my year. But I've been dabbling in 3 or 4 different projects within Playform. One of them is Ganalog, which is the generative analog instant photographs. But I've also been training it on some self-portrait doodles based on some that I had done originally on Additional app back in 2019. I had done a series of little doodles. So I'm training Playform to recreate those for me as well, to drop in a small collection. I've been training it to do my main project is called Portals to Enchantment, which is the project that I initially pitched to Playform, saying, please, let me be a resident in your program because this is what I want to do so badly. It's Portals to Enchantment is a series that's trained on all of my travel photography taken in Puerto Rico. And the AI has created its own dreamy little landscapes that look like landscapes. Imagine if you took a hit of LSD and you went to Puerto Rico and were like, oh my God, this is what the island looks like. That's essentially what Portals to Enchantment is going to be like. So most of my projects are photography based, and training the AI on that, but just experimenting with some doodles as well. And, who knows what else I'll feed the machine.
Awesome. It sounds so fun, honestly. I'm like, man, conversations like this make me wish like I dabbled in art more, and, played around with these kinds of things and everything. It's not, I know I should. I need to reach out to, what's her name?
Jennifer Chang. Yeah, Playform is free.
Figure something out. I need like the beginner like residency before I even step to Mrs. Chang.
This is absolutely perfect for you though, because it's no code AI. So it does everything for you. All you need is, your input collection of images. And then you could just click, all the features and train it however you want, however long you want. You could pick the results. You could make it in a little GIF. You could make a little video, and you don't need any technical. That's why I love it so much, because I'm not a coder. I have no technical bones in my body, but Playform made it possible for me to experiment with GAN, and it's phenomenal. I'm obsessed.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like I would get totally obsessed with something like this. It sounds like super, super fun just to like tinker around with. What you mentioned, you collect things that you like, and that's very disciplined of you. I try to do the same thing, but every now and again, I try and flip some junk so I can get more stuff that I like. And then I get stuck with it. That's what Matt and I were talking about. In terms of like our shakedown, love to just talk to our guests who are collectors about just cool projects that they have in their wallet, or that they're currently checking out, or just what kind of stuff that you collect just because you enjoy it.
Man, it's actually been a while since I've actively collected regularly, but oh man, put me on the spot.
It's very
edit this out. Don't worry about it.
If you look at my wallet, I have thousands of NFTs.
Your wallet.
I have thousands of NFTs, and now I can't think of one that I love so much. Oh my goodness. Projects off the top of my head right now, Unofficial Punks by Second Realm is one of my favorites in my wallet. I have the Pink Punk. I remember when he first came out with that project, I had looked at them and I was like, oh man, these are kind of dope. He made them off of, rest in peace, Money Aladas. Had a custom punk with like the double layer eyes. Yeah. And Second Realm had seen his punk and was like, I really like your punk. And that's what spurred the Unofficial Punks that he created. And I had stared at them for the longest time. I was like, oh man, these Unofficial Punks are so cool. Like I want one. I can't afford an actual punk. And at the time, I think they were priced at like half an ETH. And I was like, oh man, I can't do that. And then he released like his Spud Gang, membership. And I was like, okay, well, I'll get the People's Potato for this Spud Gang membership that you've got going on. And that, gave me a discount on the Unofficial Punk. So I got it for half price. And I was like, yeah, I finally got my Unofficial Punk. But that's definitely one of my favorites in my wallet.
Love that. And then before we go, if there's anything that you want to shout out or just remind people of collections or work that's soon to drop or soon to be released, hit people with your Twitter, of course, and then any other sites they need to be following you at, and then any of those dates.
All right. Well, my Twitter, first and foremost, is at the YRDGZ, as well as my Instagram. So feel free to follow me there for some not so spicy takes and some pictures of lights and cats. As far as my projects, you can check out my pin tweet if you're interested in my light photography. You can check out my collection there, my Insta abstracts, which is what my Playform series Ganalog is trained and based on. Again, shout out to Abysms for requesting this podcast interview. Shout out to all of my additional peeps. Thank you for the ride of a lifetime. Shout out to Jake Bruckham once again for being my first collector. Shout out to Lulu XXX for actually being my top collector. And shout out to Playform for letting me be free and explore all of the creative possibilities that they have to offer. And shout out to you guys for having me. It's been a blast.
Dude, you're like a pro. You just shout out to you.
Yeah.
For crushing this podcast. This has been super fun, and really, really appreciate you hopping on with us.
Wait. Before we go, I want to do a big shout out to Max Osiris before we head out, because not a lot of people know this, but during the trash art movement of 2020, he did Crypto Art Show 2.0 in Los Angeles, California. I am East Coast based. I am in New Jersey. And he had reached out and was like, hey, I'm doing this show. I would really love it if you came out. I instantly bought tickets. I was like, I'm down. Let's do it. Then some COVID guidelines hit and they're like, no, we're not going to do the show. He canceled it. And I was like, no, I already bought my ticket. And he was like, fuck it. Because you're coming, we're going to do the show. Like, I'm going to make it work.
Wow.
So I ended up, I went to LA. We did Crypto Art Show 2.0. It was amazing. And at the end, I was, just going to go straight to the airport and fly back home. And at the end of the night, Max was like, absolutely not. I'm not going to let that happen. And he hooked me up with a room for that night. And I was like, I've got this. You're taken care of. Thank you so much for coming out. I hope you enjoyed the show. And that was a lifetime of an experience of a lifetime. So I just really wanted to give a shout out to Max Osiris for that moment.
Hell yeah.
Damn. Yeah. +1 to loving Max Osiris and everyone that you mentioned and the whole space and everything. Yelly, this is an absolute pleasure to be able to chat with you. And I'm just so excited to watch everything that you're doing. And I hope that you keep being you, doing you, and keep on creating.
Thank you. And one last thing to blow your minds. It's everyone says yelly, but it's actually jelly, like peanut butter and jelly.
God damn it. You've got the most confusing series of handles and pronunciation.
I am so sorry. I let it fly.
Wait, where does that come from?
Well, my full name, Americanized is Yelitza. So when people say it, they say the yelly, but in Spanish it's Jelitza. So it's jelly.
Jelly.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for blowing my mind.
Yes, and correcting us.
Yeah.
Again, thank you so much for having me.
It's been awesome. Really appreciate it, Jelly. Thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to this week's episode. Just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Proof of Beauty. Proof of Beauty is an experimental digital experience studio. The blockchain is their canvas and the tokens are their brush. You can learn more about Proof of Beauty by checking out pob.studio. You can follow them on Twitter as well at PRRF Beauty. That's PRRF Beauty on Twitter and pob.studio on their homepage to learn more about their projects like Hash, London, and Publico. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.